now joined by SABC News senior reporter Samkele Maseko. Samkele, a very good afternoon to you. So already in its first week, COP29 has already been exposed to finance-related questions. Just talk to us about what this essentially means for South Africa and what the South African ministry essentially wants to see in as far as financing is concerned.
Well, Unathi, what we do know is that the Minister of Fisheries, Forestries and Environment within South Africa, Dr. Deon George, will be heading and co-chairing the Mitigation Commission alongside his Norway counterpart, which will look at some of the measures that needs to be put in place in order to mitigate climate change across the world, in particular for those developing countries, where these developing countries are saying that the developed nations that have burned coal for centuries must contribute about $1.5 trillion per annum in order to mitigate climate change and to help these particular countries through adaptation measures once climate change has reached these particular countries. For instance, if you look at South Africa, how we've been ravaged by heavy snow within the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal, the Eastern Cape and the Free State Province, that these particular municipalities need this particular loss and damage fund in order to assist them in dealing with these particular measures and to have necessary measures in place within the local sphere of government, which is the coal face of climate change, in order to be able to adapt and order to mitigate these particular challenges that these communities face with climate change. We've also got South African delegation through the Presidential Climate Commission. We did earlier on speak to Labour Commissioner, who is Inosa, who did earlier on raise the issues of CBAM, which is being introduced by European countries, which will have an adverse effect for the automobile sector within the country, saying that this is hampering on the sovereignty of the just transition of nations, and in particular motor manufacturing countries such as South Africa, because if they don't reduce carbon emissions or change from carbon emitting engines into electric engines, that will have an adverse effect on that particular sector of the South African economy.
And I mean, Samkele, the second week of COP29 is also coinciding with the G20 Leaders Summit, which, of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa is attending. Are we likely to see him there, particularly as South Africa would want to make its case here on the COP29?
President Cyril Ramaphosa will not be making his way to this particular COP. They will essentially, this COP29 is going to lay the foundation for the big COP next year, which is COP30, which will be held in Brazil, where the heads of states will also be deliberating extensively on some of the immediate initiatives that are being made by sovereign states and their own domestic funds that they are using in order to introduce climate change or go into greener economies or greener emission or greener space within their own countries and moving away from fossil fuels. That will be the major COP, particularly looking at the changing geopolitical tectonic plates globally with the reintroduction of Donald Trump as the President of the United States of America as of next year. That will also say that he has a perspective when it comes to the green energy bill within his own country. He sees it as a scam, and that he will be building and digging more coal within his own country and building more coal powered stations. Are saying that China as well is building more coal-powered stations, 2 per month, if I'm not mistaken. Those are the words of President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump. It will be rather interesting that he is saying that these particular funds that are being needed by developing nations of about $1.5 trillion per annum, he will be pulling those funds away. He may be moving away from the Paris Agreement once again when it comes to climate change. It's going to be interesting what will take place in the G20 summit next year once the President Cyril Ramaphosa takes over as the president of the G20 nations, which will be held in Johannesburg next year in South Africa. But he, yesterday, as the President of the Republic of South Africa, he was part of a discussion around this just transition and how South Africa sees it fit and how just is the just transition. The Labour Commissioner within the Presidential Climate Commission of South Africa They've got serious issues with the CBAM that is being introduced by the EU, which will have an adverse effect on the South African economy, particularly on the automobile sector, the informal sector of the automotive sector within South Africa. That will be your bush mechanics. How will they survive? How will they survive? How will that informal economy go? Where will those individuals go within that informal economy? You go to the petrol attendants. So when it comes to the petroleum sector, where will those petrol attendants go? Will they be reskilled? How will they be reskilled once you go into the NEF, which is going to be the electric vehicles?